The chill and the plea. The city air bit with the ferocity of approaching winter. Wind whipped down the bustling street, carrying flurries of discarded wrappers and the distant sounds of traffic, forcing pedestrians to hunch deeper into their thick jackets. Streetlights cast long, dancing shadows, illuminating the hurried pace of lives intersecting, but rarely connecting. Amidst this urban rush, almost invisible, stood a fragile figure, a woman whose thin, worn clothes were no match for the penetrating chill. Exhaustion carved deep lines onto her prematurely aged face, and her cracked hands trembled, partly from cold, partly from gnawing anxiety. She held fast to the tiny mittened hand of her daughter, Lily, a child of perhaps 5 winters. Lily's large, unnervingly clear eyes stared up at her mother, reflecting not just confusion and the dull ache of hunger, but also an unwavering trust that pierced the woman's heart. Before them loomed the silver fork, an oasis of warmth and light. Its polished brass sign gleamed under a dedicated spotlight, the heavy, dark wood door promising sanctuary and privilege within. Through the expansive, crystal-clear windows, they could see a tableau of effortless comfort. Diners bathed in the soft glow of elegant lamps, silverware glinting, laughter echoing softly, hot meals steaming invitingly. The contrast between the biting wind outside and the cocoon of plenty inside was a physical blow, both alluring and deeply intimidating. The woman hesitated, her breath misting in the frigid air. Could she? Dare she cross that threshold? A wave of dizziness washed over her, a consequence of cold and emptiness. But then Lily squeezed her hand, a small, grounding gesture. Mustering a desperate courage, fueled by maternal instinct, the woman took a shaky breath and pushed open the imposing door. The immediate hush was deafening. The low hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, it all seemed to freeze. Heads turned, eyes, curious, indifferent, annoyed, scornful, fixed on the intruders who had dared to breach the polished barrier between worlds. Her worn boots, damp from the pavement, made soft, apologetic sounds on the gleaming marble floor. Ignoring the weight of unspoken judgment, she spotted a young waiter, Mark, adjusting a place setting nearby. "Please," she began, her voice raspy, barely audible above the suddenly resumed murmurings. "Forgive the intrusion, but my children, we haven't eaten properly in days. Is there any chance, just a little food? Anything you could spare? Anything at all?" Rules and rejection. Mark looked up startled. His professional smile faltered, replaced by visible unease. He was young, clearly uncomfortable, his eyes darting from the woman's desperate face to her shivering child, then around the opulent dining room as if seeking backup or an escape route. He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly out of his depth. His gaze finally landed, with a mixture of apprehension and relief, on the approaching figure of the restaurant manager. Arthur moved with practiced, smooth authority, his sharp suit immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, a portrait of controlled efficiency. He arrived beside Mark, his posture radiating disapproval before he even spoke. His gaze, cool and appraising, swept over the woman, taking in the frayed edges of her coat, the smudge of dirt on her cheek, lingering for a moment on her inadequate shoes. It then flickered, devoid of warmth, towards little Lilia, who instinctively hid further behind her mother's legs. "Is there a problem here?" Arthur's voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a sharp, interrogative edge that cut through the ambient noise, demanding explanation. The woman flinched, swallowing hard against the lump in her throat. Shame warred with desperation. "No, I mean, yes," she stammered, trying to keep her voice level, trying not to betray the tremor running through her. "My children, sir, they haven't eaten, not really, not in days." She gestured vaguely, helplessly. "We don't need much. A little soup, some bread, just enough to stop the hurting." She hated the pleading tone in her own voice, the way it exposed her vulnerability. "I promise," she added hastily, seeing his expression remain impassive. "I can pay you back. As soon as I get on my feet, I swear I'll come back and pay." Her earnest, heartfelt words seemed only to solidify the invisible wall between her and the room's other occupants. Murmurs intensified nearby. "Really, the nerve of some people," a woman whispered loudly to her companion. "This is hardly the place," a man grumbled, pointedly turning away. Arthur let out a barely audible sigh, a minute signal of impatience quickly masked by professional decorum. He adjusted his cufflink. "Please, sir," the mother whispered, her last shred of hope fraying, "just something small, from my little girl." Arthur's gaze remained cold, his stance unyielding. "Madam," he stated, his tone leaving no room for argument, "this is the Silver Fork. We are a fine dining establishment, not a charity. We have standards, and we do not provide complimentary meals. If you are unable to pay for our services—" He paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. "Then I must insist that you leave the premises immediately." Defeat washed over the woman in a cold wave. Her shoulders slumped, the last spark of fight extinguishing within her. She drew Lilia even closer, shielding her daughter with her own body, as if to protect her from the crushing weight of this final rejection. Arthur took a half step forward, clearly intending to escort them out. But then a subtle shift occurred. From a secluded corner table, a chair slid back quietly, but purposefully. Vin Diesel rose to his feet. He hadn't been overtly watching, yet it was clear he had absorbed the entire painful exchange. His presence, even in stillness, had a certain gravity. But now, as he moved, the ambient chatter in the restaurant didn't just quieten, it ceased altogether. Every eye was drawn to him. There was an undeniable aura about him, a blend of focused intensity and calm self-assurance. He walked towards the front counter area, his strides measured and unhurried. His gaze fixed not on the manager, but on the woman and child. Arthur, caught mid-motion, froze. Recognition dawned, followed by a visible wave of nervousness that momentarily cracked his professional veneer. The manager who had moments ago wielded his authority like a shield now seemed flustered. Mr. Diesel," Arthur stammered, his voice losing its earlier crispness. "Is everything all right, sir?" Vin offered Arthur only the briefest, most peripheral glance, a silent dismissal of his attempt to control the situation. He stopped directly before the woman, his large frame creating an unconscious barrier between her and the manager, between her and the staring eyes. He looked down at her, his expression serious but not unkind. His voice, when he spoke, was deep, calm, and resonated with quiet power. "What's going on here?" he asked simply, addressing her directly. Encouraged by his directness, yet still trembling, the woman explained again, the words tumbling out, days without food, the desperate hope for anything, the shame, the promise to repay. Little Lilia, sensing a change, peeked out from behind her mother, looking up at Vin Diesel with eyes that held a universe of childish fear, mingled with an unexpected, fragile flicker of hope. Arthur, recovering slightly, tried to regain control. "Sir, with all due respect," he began, stepping forward slightly. "The restaurant has policies regarding payment. It wouldn't be fair to our clientele if we simply—" Vin didn't even turn. He simply raised a hand, a small definitive gesture that cut Arthur off mid-sentence. He then looked back at the manager, a single eyebrow arching slightly. "Policies?" The word was quiet, yet it seemed to echo in the sudden, profound silence. He let the pause stretch for a beat. "Some things," Vin stated, his voice level but carrying undeniable conviction, "are more important than policies. Everyone deserves a meal when they're hungry. Everyone." Warmth, food, and hope. Vin Diesel's gaze shifted back to the woman, softening almost imperceptibly. "You don't need to worry about anything," he reassured her, his tone gentle but firm. "You and your little girl are welcome here." He then turned to the still hovering waiter. "Mark," he instructed, "find them a comfortable table, a quiet one, and bring them whatever they need to get warm. Soup, pasta, bread. Make sure it's hot." Mark, jolted into action, nodded with undisguised relief and gratitude. "Yes, sir. Right away, Mr. Diesel." He gestured towards a secluded corner booth. The woman could only manage a choked sob, a whispered "thank you," as tears of sheer, overwhelming relief finally streamed down her face. She hugged Lilia tightly, burying her face in her daughter's thin hair for a moment, before allowing Mark to lead them away from the gawking stares. The booth felt like a sanctuary. Lilia, hesitant at first, finally scrambled onto the plush seat, her small hands gripping the heavy, polished wood of the table, as if anchoring herself in this unbelievable reality. Mark returned almost instantly with 2 large glasses of water, placing them down with a genuine, encouraging smile. Lilia eyed the glass, then looked at her mother, a silent question. The woman nodded, managing a watery smile. Eagerly, the child took a long sip, her small face lighting up with simple pleasure as the cool water soothed her dry throat. From his own table, Vin watched them, a quiet, unreadable expression on his face. He saw the tension slowly begin to ease from the woman's shoulders, saw the child's cautious exploration of her new surroundings. Soon, Mark reappeared, balancing a tray laden with food that smelled divine, a basket of crusty, warm bread. 2 deep bowls sending up fragrant steam from a rich, savory soup, and a large plate piled high with pasta, coated in a vibrant, aromatic sauce. Lilia gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. "Monty, look! It's beautiful!" The woman's own eyes welled up again as she looked at the bounty before them. After giving them a few moments, Vin ambled over to their table. He leaned down slightly, addressing the child directly. "How's that pasta, little warrior?" Lilia looked up, her mouth full, and nodded vigorously, beaming. "It's the bestest," she managed to say. Vin chuckled softly, a warm, genuine sound. "Glad to hear it. Eat up." He then straightened, meeting the mother's gaze. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder for a fleeting moment. "This is all taken care of," he said quietly. "Eat as much as you like, and Mark is packing up a generous amount for you to take with you when you're ready." The woman clasped her hands together, her voice thick with emotion. "Sir, there are no words. How can I ever? May God bless you for your kindness." Vin gave a slight shake of his head, dismissing her thanks. "No need for that. Just focus on what matters. Taking care of yourself, taking care of her." He nodded towards Lilia. "She's got your strength in her eyes." A parting lesson, the simple sounds emanating from the corner booth, Lilia's occasional happy sigh, the soft scrape of a spoon against a bowl, began to subtly thaw the frosty atmosphere in the Silver Fork. The initial shock among the other diners had given way to a mixture of quiet contemplation, lingering curiosity, and perhaps, for some, a pang of discomforting self-reflection. Conversations resumed, but softer now, less boisterous. When the woman and Lilia, visibly restored by the warmth and nourishment, finally prepared to leave, Mark met them near the entrance, holding a heavy bag filled with containers of food, enough for several more meals. Vin Diesel was there too, waiting near the door. He extended his hand to the woman. As she took it, feeling the strength and warmth in his grip, he looked her directly in the eye. Under the cover of the handshake, he discreetly folded a substantial bill and slipped it into her hand, along with what felt like a small, stiff card. "Stay strong," he murmured, his voice low but resonant, a command and encouragement in one. Tears sprang to her eyes again, but this time they were tears of hope. She could only nod, clutching the unexpected lifeline, whispering a final heartfelt "thank you." Vin watched them step back out into the now slightly less intimidating night, the heavy door closing softly behind them. Through the polished glass, he saw Lilia turn back, her face bright, and wave with all her might. "Thank you, mister," her clear voice piped, just audible through the door. Vin raised a hand in a brief, acknowledging wave before turning back to the hushed dining room. He stood for a moment, his imposing figure naturally drawing every eye. The silence stretched, expectant. When he spoke, his voice was calm, devoid of accusation, yet carried an undeniable authority that commanded attention. "What happened here tonight?" he began, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of the diners, the staff, Arthur, "isn't an isolated incident. It's easy to forget, sitting here in comfort, that there are people all around us fighting battles we can't even imagine." He gestured vaguely towards the door. "Mothers like her, fathers, children. Struggling not out of choice, but because life dealt them a hand that's harder than most. They're often invisible, overlooked." He let his words settle. "We plan our dinners, our vacations, our futures. We worry about stock prices and deadlines. But how often," he paused, his gaze intense, "do we genuinely see those who worry only about where their next meal or their child's next meal will come from?" He looked directly at Arthur, then around the room again. "Life isn't always fair, but kindness," he stated simply, "kindness is a choice. Costs us very little, but to someone else, ... it can change everything. Remember that." No one spoke. Some diners looked down at their expensive meals with suddenly diminished appetite. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Arthur, the manager, stood stiffly by the counter, his expression thoughtful, perhaps even humbled. Vin walked back to his table, collected his coat, and then approached Mark, who was clearing the table. He pressed another folded bill, clearly a generous tip, into the waiter's hand. "You did good tonight, Mark. Remember this." Mark nodded earnestly, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding. "Yes, sir, I will. Thank you." And with a final encompassing glance at the room, Vin Diesel turned and walked out into the night, leaving behind the lingering aroma of fine food, the echo of his words, and a profound, unspoken lesson hanging heavy in the air of the Silver Fork.